I've got an extra 15 minutes today, so it's an hour and a quarter. I hope you've brought a very interesting book, or you're knitting or something like that. First, could you put your hands up if you do watercolour? Brilliant. I like painting pretty pictures, so I'm hoping to get something nice. I prepared this last night because I want to finish it, and I've got the original material I've used, which is a large Xerox copy, photocopy. The Xeroxes have a very nice quality to them that I absolutely love. So I'm going to try and imitate this colour, and Adam, who's absolutely brilliant, is going to be helping us along, and I'll get him to get this on the monitor first so we can see what we're doing. That's what I'm hoping to paint, and I've already started mixing colour for that. What do you think? Anywhere like that round here? Yeah, right. Please see me afterwards and tell me, because I'll go and take some photographs. And there's the drawing. That's a bathroom drawing. I did it in my bathroom last night. The first one I did in my room, and it was so dark I could barely see. And I thought, well, the light's really bright in the bathroom. And also it doesn't matter if I drop masking fluid everywhere because it's tiles. And this is covered in masking fluid. I've masked the trees. So, in fact, I've masked the spaces between the trees. So that's going to be interesting. We'll see what happens. A little bit about my background. I used to go on plein air field trips in the West Country with my colleagues. And here they are. I'm the only person who can say my art gallery does 28 miles to the gallon. So my background was just painting, love painting from childhood, who doesn't? I painted from when I was 6. My dad taught me when I was 3 to draw. I kept asking him to draw me trains, and the third time I asked, he gave me the pencil and told me to get on with it. And then at 5, he taught me to do watercolour, and I'm still struggling. So when I see people who've been doing it for a few weeks, a few months, 3 years, I just imagine how brilliantly accomplished they'd be if they'd had all the chances I've had. But never mind, because I can pass on all the tricks that I've found out. And that's what we're going to do now. I'm going to put this over here. I've put another easel up here. And that's going to make it very easy for me to refer to this. And I've started by mixing some colours. I'll go through what those colours are, and you'll be able to mix greens. Does anybody want to know how to mix greens? Or has anybody had any trouble mixing greens? Yeah, well, I'm putting my hand up as well. Put those there. And what you do to mix greens is forget about the tube colour green. Start with yellow. There are 750,000 greens. 3/4 of all the colours we see are green. I'm going to put this picture back again in a minute because we've got a little bit more light and we'll have another look at it. So green is made up of all the colours on the colour wheel, what we call green. One great way to start with green is to start with a lot of yellow. And that's cadmium lemon. The reason it's for cadmium lemon is it's very powerful and it's got a bit of oomph, it's got a bit of opacity. And I can hear some of you thinking, well, surely watercolour should be transparent. Well, watercolour is transparent. You don't have to make it transparent. It'll be transparent whether you like it or not. And I prevent painting from being a little bit wishy-washy by giving it some oomph with colours like cadmium lemon. Start with the cadmium lemon and add the green very slowly. And this colour here is going to be the base colour for this. I'm going to put it back. And I've just been struggling to try and get this underlying yellow here. So the first colour I'm going to put on, and I'm going to put it all over the painting, will be cadmium lemon. And I experimented with different greens. I've got lots of different greens in tubes. Now, for a long time, I was only using cadmium lemon, phthalo green, and a brown, burnt umber, burnt sienna. And I could get lots of greens with that. But I love my colours, and I got a bit fed up with that. And I talked to a very fine painter called Paul Talbot-Greaves a few months ago. And he was suggesting some other colours I could use because his greens are absolutely brilliant. So since then, I've started using Hooker's Green, Sap Green in Winsor & Newton and M. Graham. And those two companies make completely different greens. And I've found two greens you can use out of a tube. Tube greens that are reliable. And they're the M. Graham Sap Green and Hooker's Green. But for this green, I wanted something really bright and sunny. So I've used Winsor & Newton Hooker's Green. And I'm making a bright green using Winsor & Newton Hooker's Green. Quite a lot of cadmium lemon, about 10 times more cadmium lemon than the green, and then a little bit of brown, and I've mucked about with a few other colours just to try and match that colour. Just before we start, I'll show you how you can gauge a colour. Here's a piece of paper with a tiny hole in it. Can you see that? Now afterwards, this kit is absolutely brilliant, really super. You've got a lovely projection, but afterwards, I will show you the painting, you'll actually see it, and the colours will be slightly different. But what you do is you mix your colour, you put it through that tiny hole, put it over a bit of yellow, or whatever the colour is on the photo you're using, and you pull that away and you see if it's similar. So that's what I've been doing this morning, the last 15 minutes. I think it's about right. It's as near as I'm probably going to get. So now we're going to put paint on. Did you like that technique? Cut a hole because it isolates the colour. You'll get a lot of surprises. Colour's always much greyer than you think. So it's always much greyer than I think. I don't know about you. So I'm going to stick this here. That's my reference. And I'll be diving over there. In fact, I'm going to bring it a little bit closer now. And we're going to start painting. I've got masking around the trees, so I'm just going to paint over the trees. I've got quite a bit of white masking that's going to mask white plants in the foreground. And there in this zone here in the foreground, and there's also a little stile here. There's a plank, looks like a bench, and a rail. So I'm going to just get the paint on, and I'm going to spatter water over it, because when I apply the paint, I'm going to spatter that, and I'm going to get a little bit of extra white. And the white will be these bright white leaves in the foreground. They're white because they're glinting in the sun. I love to look at something dead ahead, the sun dead ahead, and probably just above and out of shot. And what that does is two things. It shines through the leaves, giving this beautiful, luminous, greenish yellow colour, because it's rather like stained glass in a cathedral. You're looking at the live light from ahead shining through the leaves, not bouncing off the top of them, and that'll give you a more sombre green. But you'll also get bright white, which is where the sun is catching surfaces that are just the right angle, and they will glint. And even brick and masonry will glint in the sunshine. It's a reflection, basically. The sun is reflecting off it. And the sun is powerful enough to give a reflection of its light from practically anything. There we go. I think I've got enough foreground done. So now I'm going to fill all this with water. And I'm going to get a stencil. So I'm going to rip up paper. And that's going to create the ragged edge of this riverbank. So you rip up pieces of paper like this. I think you can see it on the monitor. Brilliant. So they're jagged edges. You know what happens if you put a straight edge and then you can imagine spraying paint along that edge. Well, I'm spattering, but it's similar. And you'll get a straight line. Well, this avoids that problem completely. So I'm just sticking it together, and then I'll use that throughout the painting. I just choose the right bits. And I'm ripping along the grain. If you rip across the grain, you'll get very rough edge. So you rip one way, you'll get a very straight edge. You rip another way, and it'll be much more jagged. That's because paper has a grain where it comes out of the machine. It won't take long to do this. And I regard this as the painting. This is part of the painting. This is the difficult part of the painting. The easy bit is putting the paint on. Right, I've got my stencil. Now I need to find my tape. I might possibly have put that... Have you got any masking tape there?
I've got some of that kind.
That'll do. Lovely. So Adam, the producer here, has just given me this tape. And I'm saying that because you all heard that, but it won't pick up on the feed later. So anyone watching on YouTube, Adam is over there being brilliant, and he's just given me this tape because I've left mine in my kit behind the curtains there. So that's that stencil done. Lots of ripped up paper. And we're going to spatter some paint. I'm using quite a large brush for this. This is a number 12 sable. And they're very good for spattering. It's virtually impossible to spatter like this with a synthetic brush. The reason is this, that the sable will give these great big blobs of colour. And they hit the paper and go star-shaped with the force, with the impact. If you try this with a synthetic brush, there will be paint on the ceiling. They're so resilient and springy. But it will also spray thousands of tiny little dots. You won't get these big blobs. Sable's got a balance of all of these qualities, and it's just right for spattering. It wasn't designed for it. It just happens to work really well. So I'm spattering colour, and the reason I'm doing it is because I want this yellow background to be textured. I'm just turning my palette upside down because I've got green paint running into this light yellowy green. It's virtually yellow, but it's the sunlit green. It's the colour of the sunlit green, sunshine shining through the leaves. So I'm spattering away. I'm trying to build up the colour now. And I want to overcome the problem with watercolour of the fact that it goes very pale. So I get a lot of colour on there. I'm going to just bring this over here, mix more colour, mix more paint, and get it on there. And then we'll be using the hairdryer. Yep, there's a hairdryer there. Now the next thing I want to do, bring this back. I want to just have a look and see where the distribution of that white more or less stops. Put that back there. Carry on spattering. So there's a lot of white in the foreground, but there's not very much in the distance. And I've already masked some white. So by having masked white and spattered white, I've got a combination of techniques, not just one, and it's much more convincing. So this isn't actually really an expressive painting. It doesn't tell a story. It doesn't tell you how I feel about it. It's just as this place, as near as I can get it on this piece of paper, and it's beautiful. And I love beauty. I love the act of vision, the act of seeing. And I was wondering why paintings are beautiful. Why do we enjoy paintings so much over photographs? Why do we just enjoy looking at them? And I think it's to do with seeing. We take seeing for granted. I'm just going to take the stencil away. But when we look at a painting, it puts the information into our visual mind, our visual cortex, through our eyes, into a different part of the brain, and we just enjoy seeing all over again. Because very often the artist, and you'll see these with some of these brilliant painters, you're going to get it this afternoon with Helidon, they put the information on the paper, but they allow you to put it together. And that is enjoyable, because we waste our vision on, reading bank statements, getting around. We don't enjoy it. We don't think, oh, how wonderful, I can read this bill. But has anybody here ever had a cataract operation and then been able to see afterwards? And what a joy that was. Well, looking at paintings, for me, is about the joy of seeing. There's no story. The story in my paintings is entirely yours. So if you look at my paintings, I'm not imposing a narrative on them, but you can stand in that place and be there, and you make the story. And in fact, if you buy a painting from me, it will have in its provenance your name and your title printed, whatever the title is here. And that will become the name of the painting, because the painting is your story. No stories in my painting. Story is yours. So now I'm going to carry on, and we're going to do the other side of the riverbank. And it's just going to start to take shape in this very light yellowy green. It's almost too yellow. It's bizarre, but I try to make the paintings a bit strong, a little bit radical, and it creates impact. Something must be lost in the photography. Sometimes you gain from photography. I absolutely love photography. I love the digital age. I've used film cameras for years as well. But you don't look at I don't look at a photograph. I look into it like a window. It's like opening a window. And as you look at it, especially if you're painting, I've recently heard the concept of the thinking hand, which architects use. They apparently, some of them start to draw. They don't think, they draw. And once they start to draw, then they think. And as you draw and paint over many hours or many days, the visual mind takes over. You start to see things in that photograph that you could never have seen before. And it's amazing. It's an amazing process. Now we're going to get into this background area, which is paler and greyer. There's a bud mass up there in the leaves, and the leaves aren't out yet, but they're coming out. This is April time. Get my paints back up here, where I can get at them. And I've got Naples yellow. It's a really good colour for taking control. I use it a little bit like corn flour in cooking. It's kind of stodge, but it leaves you easily able to make a very subtle colour, like that one. It take ages, and it's not particularly transparent. It's not going to go weak, but it's going to be pale. It's absolutely fantastic for doing these pale pastel colours. So now I'm going to stick that into the background. I want it to be about right. I want it to look right. So there we go. That's going into the background. I'm going to do a few big brush strokes, and that will give it impact. There's also quite a bit of yellow in there. I don't want to lose my colour all the time, so I'm going to, by washing the brush. So I've got another brush here with more yellow on it. By having more brushes, or by keeping your older brushes, you find you can save on paint because you don't have to keep washing your brush out. Sable brushes are very, very easy to wash out. Much easier than a nice fine synthetic brush. Many good synthetic brushes around. But these brushes really wash out beautifully. Easy. You just give them a twirl and the colour's gone. Right, now we're going to have to do some drying. That's the background more or less done. I probably have to put a little bit more colour on at some point. Let's see if I've got my little hole here. Remember that? I'm just going to evaluate how dark that is, because when you see something you think it's pale, very often it's much darker than you think. So I'm putting that on the paper. It looks about right now, but I know from experience it will dry paler. So I'm just going to put a little bit more colour in by dumping cobalt blue in. There we go. We give it a bit more strength. And that's the background done. You know, if I turn around fast enough, I can see myself doing what I just did. Now the next problem is hair drying. So I'm going to get the hairdryer out, get everything out of the way that can be blown away, and we'll start with the hairdryer. Oh no, we do the painting. I'm going to blow colour back into the painting so it dries on the painting. Now it's just possible I might ask some brave person to go into the gloom behind me and get one of my industrial strength hairdryers out of my red bag. So if anybody wants to volunteer, be my guest. Thank you. Oh, there we are. Yeah, it's right there. Fantastic. If there's another plug there, that would be brilliant, but no. There isn't. Okay.
I'll take this one out.
Yeah, I'll just stop it. There you go. No, you're fine. Thank you very much. I've got a second hairdryer here. This one's got a little bit more power. Now, while I'm about it, I'm just going to put the yellow over the trees as well, like that. Do you remember I said I masked the trees? Well, I can paint right across them because the masking will protect everything else. And that will give a nice underlying yellow in the trees. Now, one way of testing whether something's dry is to try and draw on it with a pencil. So, there's my pencil. It's a nice sharp 2B. Many paintings are wrecked by not waiting for them to dry. Watercolour is the art of stopping, not just at the end. We're all able to wreck our paintings by overworking them at the end, but simply by overworking stages, not stopping, going on and on and on. If you get tired, you get fed up when you're painting, it's time to stop, have a break. You can dry it and then carry on with another layer, and that's what we're going to do. But before we do that, we've got to make sure it's absolutely dry. So what I'm doing is I'm putting little pencil marks on the paper, and I can feel that it's dry. What about that? Now that's not quite dry. You know what it's like when you try and draw with pencil on wet paper? You know when you're in the kitchen and you put a piece of paper down and you write on it, and you can't because there's a little pool of water on the surface. Well, I just use that, so this is my dampness gauge. Very useful. Saves me time because I know exactly when it's dry. Lots of little pencil marks, they're telling me it's dry. So that's dry. Put that away. Find my stencil. We're going to put that back, and we're going to start spattering darker colour. Now, I've already mixed it. It takes ages to mix colour, so I've saved some time, and I'm hoping I've saved about an hour and a quarter, because I reckon this is about 2¼ hours. So I've drawn it, and I've mixed the colour. I think, for me, it's about 70% mixing paint, 20% putting it on, 10% everything else on the painting, having drawn it. So much more time is spent mixing colour than you'd think. And I reckon it's about 70%. Most of the painting is done on the palette. If the palette's right, the painting will be fine. So I'm just re-wetting this because I've managed to dry off a massive pool of paint with the hairdryer, as well as the painting. I can even feel the palette's still warm, but that was a lot of paint. What do you think the paper is? Any guesses on what the paper is? Yeah, arches. Any guesses on weight? 300 GSM, yeah. And surface? I would use cold pressed or not. I would. It's great. This is rough. Yeah. What's your favourite paper, anybody? Shout out. You like? Yeah, you like cold press. It's good for detail, isn't it? Oh, you use the rough, yeah? I use this for everything. My big paintings, arches, 300 GSM, rough. Now we're going to start spattering again. So it's the same procedure again. I'm going to use this big brush here, and I'm going to start trying to spatter quite accurately because I want these shafts of light coming through. I want this shadow pattern. This is a very interesting stretch of river. It's the River Tillingbourne in the Surrey Hills. It's the highest starting river in the southeast. It starts at about 900, even 950 feet. There's a long wet patch. In fact, it's got two sources, one leading up to the well-known Leith Hill Tower and another neighbouring valley, and they join together and they form an ancient series of industrial mill ponds. And there were more industrial mills per mile doing iron and wire and alloys and dynamite, gunpowder, gunpowder all the way along. This whole valley was all about gunpowder at one time. And they used the river to make it. They had more mills per mile than any other river in England. There was no competitor. So Richard Arkwright, John Smedley, Cromford, nowhere near the Tillingbourne for the amount of industrial mills per mile on this river. And this is a feeder for an ancient mill pond. But now it's been made as an environmentally friendly reach of river that's used for fishing. It's called a fishing beat in the local parlance. And we're going to start spattering paint. I may have to mix more. I hope not, but I've got a horrible feeling I will have to. But I've got my paints there. Hooker's green, bit of cobalt blue, bit of Naples yellow, and some Payne's grey. Very dark on there. You have to take my word for it. This is quite bright green. You can't go wrong with spatter because it's going to look like leaves. Now what's happening, just to explain the spatter creates star-shaped spatters of water. You start from bottom, you work your way up, and the spatters get smaller with perspective. I'm looking at the screen to see what I'm doing, because I don't know. Actually, later on, I'll be using a mirror. Look at the painting in the mirror, because that reveals things that are going wrong that I can't see. It gives me a second image. So then, once I've spattered the water, I spatter paint into the water. And that forms a very sophisticated labyrinth of pathways that join together. And the dark isn't the leaves, it's the shadow pattern between the leaves. Because the spatters and the paint join each other up. And then some of the spatters are dry, some are wet, there's a few soft focus ones in there. It's an unbelievably sophisticated pattern. And most of us, quite rightly, simplify. I don't. I complify. I make it complicated. I don't make it complicated, but I like complexity in a painting. I like you to be able to get lost in it. So I'm not trying to find a simplified shorthand. I'm just interested in what's there and how to do it. Now, as we move further away, I'm just going to start to try and draw the shadow pattern. Always got a kitchen roll to hand. There's a bit I want to dab out there. Dab once, not twice. Why do you think that is? Dab once, not twice. What do you reckon?
Pushes it in.
That's it. Pushes it back in. So change the facet. Once, not twice. Change the facet. Once, not twice. That's very effective. So what I'm going to do now is draw this green paint up into the trees like that. And we'll start to get the trees and their shadow pattern on the land. Hope I can do it. I mean, it's a tricky one, this, but I'm sure it will be fine. Here I'm painting, but I might spatter over the painting I've done. I found it a real struggle to get this green as well. So, you know, if you ever find you're struggling to get a colour, you're in good company with me. I find it a struggle. I remember meeting a painter, watercolour painter I really admired his work for years, met him once before, but he just said, so you're in the struggle to get landscape down onto paper. You know, I thought he's absolutely brilliant. I thought, how reassuring to hear that. Now what you do, you will take this away and you'll do what you want with it. And it won't be this, but it will be something absolutely brilliant. Last thing I want to do is impose my way of doing things on you. But it's a very useful technique. You can do anything with it. And when I see people doing much better paintings than me with this, I'll know I've succeeded. Now I'm getting another brush, bigger one, and I'm joining up some spatters with the paint. And just keep going. I've nearly finished the paint, and this is a risky time. Look at that palette there. That's running out of paint. What happens when we run out of paint, especially if we're brushing, is we start doing this. We start brushing like that, ramming the heel of the brush. Let me get it in camera. Come on, you. There you go. They're brushing the heel of the brush into the paint. No paint there, brushing. And then you start brushing and ramming it onto the paper. So the palette needs to be full of paint at the last stroke. It needs to have a ton of paint after you've finished. So I don't want to fall into that trap. I'm going to mix more paint. I need more paint in this layer. This is Winsor & Newton Hooker's green, because this was just the right colour, I reckoned, to mix this. I'm putting a little bit of cobalt blue in, and I want to kind of pale it off slightly. So I've got some Naples yellow, and this is, I mixed all this 15 minutes before starting, but I've already run out. So now we're going to just do battle with that and get the colour mixed again. Hope for the best. I'm going to try and evaluate the colour with a piece of paper. I'm going to put that up against there. That'll do. That's much quicker than I did it before. And I'm going to spatter more colour. More colour. Give it some oomph. Green is a fabulous colour to have in your house. In the cities, you know, they say 98% of us Brits live in cities, and we don't see enough green. You don't have this problem here. You're bathed in green coming to Lilleshall. But having green blasting out of your walls, it's brilliant. I'm sure it's good for the eyes. So green paintings, they can have a real function. Right, I'm just getting more and more colour in. I need more colour. Right, and I've got my little spots of light. Can you see how the colour's knitted up now, and the patches of light are now holes, effectively. They're a labyrinth of holes. They're star shapes joined together. This is the difficult part of the painting. Putting the trees on is the easy bit. So I'm going to put this over here. What's the time, anybody? 12. Right. Okay. Any ideas what we're going to do for the last 20 minutes?
Could do a song.
I'll threaten you with that. Now I'm going to just do this side. It's not a shortcut. Spattering takes a long time. So I'm going to wet this zone. And get some more colour in here. And while I'm about it, I think I'm going to put the first wash on the water. So I've already got some cobalt blue there. I don't want a perfectly clean blue. There's some cobalt blue there. So that's nice. I usually use phthalo blue, but that seems all right. Can't see anything wrong with that. I've got a bit of black here. Yeah, that shows on the screen. So I'm going to blacken it up a bit. Saves me mixing more colour. I'm just going to check its strength over here. That's not too bad. I really like it to have a bit of strength in the foreground. Now what we're going to do is, because it's quick, I'll use this Hake brush, because that will rapidly brush water onto the river zone. Just here, there's a drop in the water. It's quite level, but it drops down. That's from the old days when it was an engineered supply of water for a mill pond. And there's a little trails of water going out and away on the other side. and I've masked those. But it occurred to me last night when I was masking them, it would probably work quite well with a bit of white gouache. I'd like to do whatever works. I'm using watercolour because I love it, and it's such a fantastic medium. And I don't do much mixed media or anything like that, but probably I'd love to experiment. But I'm really happy to use anything that actually works. Look, I'm just going to strengthen this with some phthalo. Bit of oomph. This is M. Graham Phthalo Blue. It's made with honey as part of the binder and gum arabic, all good ingredients, but the glycerine part comes from honey. From a certain kind of bees in Oregon, they make the most beautiful single pigment paints, and I buy them from a place in Brighton, Lawrence of Hove. There's not many places you can buy them. I expect you can get them on the internet, but I get them off the shelves. There we go, Phthalo Blue. That's a bit more like it. That's nice and strong. There we go. Right, that's the foreground with the water done. Think upside down sky. Now I'm cleaning the brush off the same brush, and I'm taking that colour up a bit and into the distance. And that's enough. That's enough. I don't want to go too close to the riverbank edge because that's still wet. Also, if I do that, I get the feeling of the ripples. Now I'm going to dry this. This time I'll move my palette away so that doesn't get dry. It's a little bit precarious there. Oh, I dried it too much. I'm going to have to re-wet it. I wasn't watching and the colour pushed out. Let's turn that off. Turn that off and just re-wet it. There's still time to do that. Another couple of seconds and it would have set with hard edges. Right, start again. A little bit more paint in the foreground. There you go. Stick the brush there. Now that's drying, I'm going to draw the water into the edge of the bank. That's the water wash from the river. Just going to pull that into the edge of the bank. It's not perfect, but it'll do. Fill up those little white spaces where it's missed. The bank's dried. Still having troubles with this. It's made a hard edge across there now. It'll be covered in ripples, so it won't matter too much. It's all good fun. There you go. You can just see a slight mark there. It won't matter. It doesn't show up on the monitor, but it's there. There's a mark down there. Right, let's get that dry. The next thing we're going to do is spatter intense dark into this foreground and get some dark paint along the opposite riverbank. Just do the pencil test again. I need this to be absolutely bone dry. It's still slightly wet there. The reason the paper isn't buckling at all is I've soaked it thoroughly, both sides, for at least 5 minutes, and then left it to stand so it carries on expanding. I lie it on varnished board. And then when it's absolutely flat, I stretch it. But if little bubbles appear, bubbling upwards, I wet the bubbles underneath. And that re-wets it and makes it go flat. Then when I stretch it, it contracts, but it contracts so much that on the end here, it can rip through the staples. So in a minute, we'll get a picture on the monitor. I'll show you the staples. You see the herringbone fashion? That stops them from the ends from ripping. The sides don't rip, they're straight staples, but it's the maximum tension is this way on the paper, but it won't buckle. Right, try it again. Spend a lot of time with the hairdryer on these. Yeah, that's dry, and that's dry, it's all dry. Get my stencil back. Was anybody at my demo the other day? Well, I can give this next joke out again then. If the painting fails, you submit this to the Royal Academy Summer Open. Right, now I need dark paint. Here's some I mixed earlier. What would we do without Blue Peter? As in, here's one I did earlier. My fingers are covered in paint suddenly, and that will appear on the painting, so I've got to wipe that off. And the brush. Naples yellow everywhere. This is Schminke Naples yellow. I staple the board onto 9mm ply and I varnish it. That's the board. I varnish the board. That stops any impurities or acid from the board coming onto the back of the painting. So here goes. We're going to start spattering the darks. And it's when we spatter the darks that it begins to make sense. Oh, thanks for asking. That's brilliant. I didn't say, did I? This has got neutral tint, but that's because I haven't got so much Payne's Grey. So I like Payne's Grey. I know at the moment I'm on M. Grey and Payne's Grey. I've used Windsor's. That's good. And I've added Phthalo Blue to the Payne's Grey because it's slightly reddish. No, sorry, I'll say that again. I usually use Payne's Grey, but I've added Phthalo Blue to the neutral tint because it's slightly reddish and it makes it deeper and darker. So now what I've done is spattered water. Now we spatter paint. This is a number 8 brush. And it's really strong, dark, black paint. And it's going everywhere, which is fine. But I don't want it there or there. Dump another bit of paper on the top. Once we've done this, I'll do the other side and the trees. Okay, that's our foreground almost done. There's a bench here. It's a style. It's a sort of plank to stand on. And I'm just making sure I've got plenty of masking around there. And I'm actually going to find it and paint. Sorry, not masking, dark paint. The bench is masked. I'm just going to find that and put paint on it, literally. Just plonk it on it, dump it on it. So I know that that's going to appear when the masking comes off. I'm spattering upwards. Now, spattering bottom to top, going upwards, means the spatters get smaller as you work upwards. And that gives you perspective. It's automatic perspective, but it's very chaotic perspective in that there's still larger things. Oh, it is clean. It's just picking up dirt from the darks. Right. Now I'm going to spatter into the distance. Smaller and more controlled, but it'll give us the texture we need. There we go. And what's it like under the trees? It's a bit, okay, there's some there as well. So a bit darker there. And I might have to darken that up by hand. Right, we'll get all of this stuff off. The stencil comes away. And what am I going to do over here? I'm going to still spatter in the foreground. Putting a piece of paper on, like, I'm trying to keep it so that it sits without touching my spatter that I've just done. And I'll reinstate that. I'm just going to do a bit of controlled spatter on this opposite riverbank. That means when I say controlled, it's going to be a bit more controlled than that lot, but I'm going to do it without stencils. So there's the spatter going in there, and this will hopefully give us the opposite shore, the darkness along the low part of the opposite shore. I need to rip something up, get us a narrow bit of stencil in there. That's it. Now I'm spattering onto the opposite shore, just looking to see where it is. Okay, that's fine. And here. I need more paint. I need much more paint. I need more paint, and I'm just going to get that. That's actually Payne's Grey. So I've got Payne's Grey going in there. It's got to be intensely dark. You can get black with Payne's Grey. It's called grey, but it's black. Let's just paint that out. I'm going to paint over that. It's going to give a bit more darkness in there. That's great. And I'm going to paint the background a little bit more darkness. I've used a touch of phthalo blue there. So now I'm going to spatter water over it. This is just to get the background, the opposite shore. And now along here, for the first time, I'm going to do a bit of painting. So I'm painting with a brush. Going to get a nice finely pointing brush, and I'm going to go into that with Payne's Grey and a tiny bit of green. I'm going to hold this here so I can see it. And I'm going to brush along under these trees. I can see some darks going along the river. And I'm painting underneath the banks. And then these little vertical streaks, you tend to get this sort of vertical feel to the foliage on the riverbank, the shadows they create. So I'm doing that, and I'm a bit of a line underneath the riverbank. And now that just leaves me to paint a bit more background, a bit more into that meadow. So that's just going to be a few soft brush strokes. The idea really is if you blur your eyes, it will look realistic. If you shut your eyes, even better. So that's the opposite riverbank. Now I need to brush the trees in. And I rather like the way the trees were full of light. So I started to mix some colour for that. So many plates around here. These palettes are made by the well-known art supplier, Robert Dias. So they are a retail chain throughout the south. I could tell how many people from the south when they responded to that. They're $2.99, and they're absolutely brilliant pallets. They make superb pallets. Right, we've got Naples yellow, burnt umber, Payne's grey, I think. A little bit of Payne's grey. I'm going to have an argument with myself about what to use. I wonder what will happen if I do cobalt blue. Cobalt blue, let's try that. It's a greenish black. It's a greenish yellowish black. That's not quite strong enough, but it's nearly there. I wonder what happens if I add green. I'm going to add some green. So let's find some green. Hooker's green. This is the Hooker's green I used in the grass, so it might as well be that one. I'll put a bit of that in. Okay, that looks quite good. That's getting there. Bit of burnt umber into the green. So far it's Hooker's green, cobalt blue, Naples yellow. It's basically a kind of mud. And there we go. We're just going to paint that across. How mad is that? Trees. You just paint it across, because I masked the gaps between the trees.
Joe, you've got around about 10 minutes.
10 minutes. Thanks. So I'm going to paint the trees all the way across using this mix. I'm going to come back to it here and add darks. So before this lot dries, I'm going to add Payne's grey to darken the bases. There we go. And then I'll have another session with a hairdryer. Just having a look to see how dark the trees are over there, and add darks to these. Get some more dark in all the way up. Once we take the masking fluid off, they'll make sense. I hope they do, because I can't tell what's going on there. Now we're going to put these trees in, and standing quite close to it just to get those in. There's also quite a bit of masking on this side, and I'll probably have to beef them up a little bit. They're going to be soft focus trees. Might go back in later and harden those up. What's happening there? Not sure. I'm going to put that in there, hope for the best. And then we'll take all the masking off. Don't usually do soft focus trees, but I've seen so many artists get away with doing soft focus wet into wet, and it'll probably work fine. It's looking promising, actually. I'm going to spatter some yellow into the sky across the trees, and then we'll go hard focus later. So this is the leaf canopy, and it's just going in there with more spatter. Now what I'll do is I'll get that started off drying, Then I'll put in the water, and while that finishes drying, I will take off the masking and put the trees in. By taking off the masking, the trees should appear. It's a really upside down way of working because I painted all the light first with masking fluid, only I couldn't even see the masking fluid. Right, I'm going to leave that to dry while I put in the water. Here goes the water, using all the colours that I've already used. I want the background water. Sometimes I call this mass zone. It's everything mixes together and blends. Put a little bit more blue in there. And that comes down to this little waterfall. Yellow, green, Payne's grey, it's all in there. So this is the background. While it's still wet, I'm going to do the reflections of the trees, but then I don't want it too literal. I just want the general feel that everything is all blurred together and going downhill, like this painting. It's all good fun. Next, I need an absolute ton of paint. It's a cliche for me, but you need a ton of paint to do reflections. It mustn't dry. It's got to be totally wet. You've got to have a huge reservoir of paint. And here it is. I've got burnt umber. I've got this yellow still. I've got cobalt blue. What is this colour? Well, it's mud. It won't be muddy if it's wet and you put it on and you leave it alone. You can have as many colours as you want. But oil painters get this colour. It's when they clean their palette, they get all the colour together, they put it in a pot, because I've done it myself. It's that colour. It's mud. And they use it for mid-tones and stuff. Paint with mud. So here am I saying paint with mud. I've got that. Now there's only 8 seconds left. I'm going to go along there with some nice yellow paint for the edge. And I'm going to brush across the water now with a crisscross water, like that. So that when I do the reflections down, they'll blend in a bit. I'm using the black there, the Payne's grey, putting that with a bit of this colour, mud, and off we go. Let's just do these trees up here, because they're dry now. In a hurry. They're too dark, but I don't mind. I'm going to just dab them back down a bit. So, is that a technique? Dab them back down? That's worked. That's all right. Get these in. Get these. Because the main thing now is going to be taking off the masking fluid. So that's all there. That's all in place. Chinese writing. I don't into Chinese. By Chinese writing, I mean a load of squiggles that us Westerners don't understand, but it's obviously very sophisticated and articulate. But this is sort of general writing that I don't understand, but it'll give us the background tree canopy. Now I can put in the trees, reflections. Here we go. Too dark. Use the mud. Got plenty of that. And sometimes call this the heart monitor trace, straight line kick, straight line kick, straight line kick. And down we go. So the painting's nearly finished. It's just a matter of taking the masking fluid off. At which point it either explodes me into life or they boot me out and I don't get back in again. So there we go. Here's the faster you paint water, the happier it is. faster you paint reflections, the happier they are. These are happy reflections. We need to be happy. And that's straight line kick, straight line kick. It just works if you're in a hurry. And I'm in a hurry. There you go. It's nearly done. It's a bit Sidney Nolan. That is the wonderful, wonderful Australian painter, Sidney Nolan. So don't take me too seriously. Want a portrait? Slash! Do you want another one? So you just get this done fairly quickly. There's the... And now I'm ready to take off the masking. I'm just going to do a sort of crisscross foreground spatter. That's sort of just mishmash, water going across the front, just to give you the foreground ripples. And a few dark reflections from the riverbank. Any second now it's going to be time, but I'm going to get this masking from the trees off. So here we go. Masking for everything comes off. I do it thick enough so you can just peel it off. And what I'm hoping is that trees will appear. That's still wet. Just dry that. No, it's still wet. I'm glad I dried it before. So while that's drying, I'm just going to put on the background here that was lifted, or I couldn't really put in because of the masking. So I just paint through everything down there. Now I'm lifting spaces between the trees. And it's rather nice because it gives a lovely feel to them, a look to them that you don't get by just painting them. That's still damp, so I've got to do that. And I have to just dry brush or lift along the edges. I've got this thing here called a cutter. It's or eradicator. It's an eradicator. It's a very, very strong lifting brush. And I'm just going to lift these edges and soften them. These are tree edges. So I'm just going to do those. Now we're lifting off the style and the little bench to stand on, probably slightly over time now, but I'm only going to be about 3 minutes to completion. Brushes going everywhere. So how do I do that? Yeah, right, got it. I'll go round like that, that's the edge of the style. Yeah, that's fine. And a few little marks across the top. Very pale. I need pale marks. Just drying that. And the style is all in yellow. The yellow light is bathing everything. I've got my hairdryer on the trees there. Need a touch more yellow in here in the palette. Amazing how much colour I go through. And you'll find the same if you do a painting like this. Ton of colour. So that's the top of that. And that's the edge of one of the legs supporting it. What we got on this side, we've got darkness. So that's the other side. That would have to dry, so I can't do anything more to that. We've got this post here, which is going to be very dark. do it down to there, open wash. That means I don't actually touch the bit that below it that's wet. Well, I'm trying not to. Now, what if I do this now? I haven't waited for it to dry, but I'll probably do. And, oh yeah, it needs a post supporting it on this side, so that actually helps the composition a bit as well. That's nice. And then it's just what's going on around here. Let's just fill in this with dark. These are the tree edges that are just barely perceptible. And this tree, I'm going to track through it. I'm going to use this as my guide. So yeah, I can see what's going on. We've got another tree there, another tree there. So you can touch in whatever you've left out. I'm going to paint that out. And I hope this is dry. That's supposed to be ivy. And we just roughen that up with some dark paint. Totally crazy, this. Don't do it at home, it's not safe. So breaking that up a bit, putting a little branch in there under that light. Darkening, snagging, and I can just darken those, and the waterfall has got to come off. So that's the little streaks of light moving away down the river. I hope they make sense. I have no idea whether they would or not really when I did them. And I've left it out of a previous painting I did many years ago of this. I'm going to do a few little streaks like that. There we go. That's probably, might make sense, might not, don't know. And then you can do streaks across the water. Here's a light scuff. It's lots of little techniques at the end, and then all marginal gains. They're all little gains you can make. Look, that's lifting. It's just a sort of breath of wind on the surface. You can do one nearer as well. Now I'm going to have a look in the mirror at the painting and see if there's anything I don't like, I can paint it out. So that's a bit much there, I'm thinking. It's amazing for revealing any errors or anything I think I wouldn't like when I came back and looked at it later. But you can't see what you actually think you see what you want to see. So I'm just dumping a little bit of yellow in there. There's a bit more beef in it for the colour. And then I've got to come into the foreground and take off all the masked light. These are all the little masked leaves. Hope it's dry. There you go, masked leaves. They're there as well. They're light glints. That one, that's all still wet, but there you go, that's nearly it. And then you can even go and touch those in, touching them in with yellow. The brush is so dirty, that'll come out as green anyway, so I haven't got to worry. And I'm just going to go across them with a little bit of yellow. Then we're going to take off the tape and hope that it looks okay. One last look in the mirror. Sometimes things look better when you leave a little bit of distress. I always ask myself at the end of a painting, even a super real painting, which takes a month. In the case of my big one there, it took a month. And at the end, I'd stop before it's finished. And then I think, this mark here, I'm going to put here, I'm going to improve this. It's going to make it look more realistic. Is it going to make it look more beautiful? If the answer's 50-50, I don't touch it. If it's no, I definitely don't touch it. So, tiny little bit there. Sorry about this. I really need to stop now because you've all got jobs to go to and homes and stuff. Who let these people in? Are they homeless? So I'm going to take it off. How badly over time am I?
6 minutes.
Oh, that's really good for me. So here we go. We peel off the tape. And hope we've got a painting. So first, thank you very much. And wherever he is, thank you to David Poxon. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for doing this brilliant thing and getting everybody together from all over the world. What do you think of that? All these artists, and you can just wander out and see them. And you've got another one, Helidon. Come and see him this afternoon. I'm going to pick this up now. The lights will go on. And that was a prediction. And you can see the actual colour. Thank you very, very much.